All right, it's 12:30, so let's begin. It's 12:30 Eastern, so welcome, good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast and Mountain, etc. Delighted to have you all with us here for the first of our Leadership Matters calls. My name is David Severance. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Chief Learning Officer here at Chirag Shah Coaching. I'll introduce myself a little more thoroughly in a couple of minutes, just so you can get a sense of where I'm coming from. But delighted to be with you here to talk through and explore what it takes for you to lead your teams effectively. Lead them towards efficiency, lead them towards teamwork, lead them towards goal achievement, and not least of which, lead them towards joy. I mean, we're in this not just for the money, not just for conquering the world and all that, but we want to enjoy what we're doing. And as a leader, you have a tremendous influence over the experience that you and everyone here has. I'd like to ask everybody, unlike Chirag's calls, we're going to keep the chat open for most of these calls. So I just wanted to ask everyone, could you please put into the chat how many people are on your team? I assume that all of you are team leaders. So if you have a team, please just put down how many people are on your team, including not just those you pay as salary, but people who contribute tremendously to the organization, maybe as an ICA or part-timer or something like that. Okay, so it looks like the range is 3 to 10 today. Okay, fine, great. Okay, thank you. So, who's that? Okay, 5 licensed agents. Okay, great. Thank you, Carla. So we're going to do the calls somewhat similar to the way Chirag does them. I will be leading the discussions. We will have slides and resources and tools and things for you to make use of after the call. Everything ends up on the platform, just like with Chirag's calls. But our focus is going to be a little bit different.
Well, keep me posted on that, and then I'm going to join this.
Could I ask you to mute yourself, please? Or I can mute you. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I was on mute first.
Okay, no worries. So we will not have people muted when you come in, because we want to facilitate, we want to kind of foster any discussion as you get to know each other. I'm certainly open if you get on a couple of minutes early, you want to say hello to somebody else on the call. Happy to do that. We don't expect 200 or 300 people on these calls because they're a little more targeted. So we won't have as large a crowd normally. So the rules will be slightly different for these calls. But anyway, so these calls will be targeted for team leaders or people thinking of starting a team. And so we won't be focusing on some of the things that you might get on Chirag's calls, like, how to handle objections, best techniques.
There's 2 ways to send email.
Best technique.
Okay, so I sent this, here it is. These
Okay, I'm going to have to mute everybody if people, okay, no worries. Yeah, we don't want to confuse people, but certainly, please be mindful that, whatever you're doing, in addition to being on the call, or if there's other people in the room, that others can hear that. So we're not going to be focusing on some of the things that you might get in Chirag's calls or somewhere else, like how to handle an objection or lead gen techniques or something like that. We're going to be focusing on the practice of leadership. And so leadership, it opens up a whole set of considerations and requires a whole set of skills that are different from the skills that you normally use in selling a home. And I'm going to assume that you're all great at those things anyway. But when we talk about leadership, there's a whole separate kind of category, as Corey and others know who've been on these calls for a while. There's Keith. Folks who've been here for a while know that there's an awful lot to discuss and explore and become effective at doing as a leader. There's a whole discipline here regarding mindset and action set that can help you align your team and position your team for the greatest possible success. So let me begin by pulling up a couple of slides to say a couple of things about myself, and then we'll hop right into it. Today will be a little bit of kind of context setting for us, but I'm looking forward to introducing a couple of things for you to think about between now and next week. Okay, let me pull this up. Okay. Okay, Carla, can you see my slide deck there? What is leadership and are you leading? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so welcome everybody. Today's topic is, what is leadership and are you leading? I'd like to just kind of say to everybody right out of the bat that leadership is a highly contemplative process. That is, there's no simple yes or no, or a simple set of do's or don'ts when it comes to leadership. Everybody would like to have that. Everybody would like to have a simple list of do these 5 things and don't do those 5 things, and you'll be an awesome leader and everything's going to be wonderful. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, because human beings are not that simple. And so we need to think about how we can understand what leadership is, effective leadership is, and then practice it on a regular basis. So one question we have to ask ourselves is, am I really leading? Herson, would you mind muting everybody while we're on this part of the process, just to make sure folks aren't bleeding through? Thank you. Okay, so just a couple things about me. So my name is David Severance. I'm a Chief Learning Officer here at CSC. Chirag and I met about 6 years ago when he came into my leadership program. I run a year-long leadership program for leaders and high achievers in a whole bunch of different industries. And we spend a year together going through what leadership is, what it isn't. And that's how we first met. And so since then, we kept in touch with each other and talked about various business adventures that we were both on. And when he decided to create CSC, he said, David, please come along. I know that a lot of these team leaders could use the kind of help that you gave me, and that they could use to perform on their teams. So it's been my pleasure to be with CSC since we opened in 2020 in spring. So we're looking forward to our 3rd anniversary coming up pretty soon. It's kind of crazy to think that we started a whole business right at the beginning of the pandemic. But it's been an awesome experience, and we're delighted to have all of you come into our our community, our family, to continue the work together that we've been doing with others, and we hope that you'll find value like others have as well. Okay, hold on a minute. Okay, great. So before I came to CSC, I was lucky to coach leaders and leadership teams at companies all around the world. I've worked in North America, Europe, East Asia, Middle East, South America. And when you work with so many leaders and teams in different businesses in different countries like that, you learn so many different ways of approaching business. And what you'll also learn is that people in one business tend to kind of get blinders sometimes, like they think there's only one way to do things. And so it can be useful to hear an injection of ideas from other places. At least it has been for me and many of my clients. So we hope that some of the things that I bring to you will be things that are a little bit outside the mainstream of real estate stuff, and that you can apply it in your business. That's certainly our intention. So a couple of things to set up. Who are these sessions going to be for? Well, the Leadership Matters sessions that I'm doing are for these kind of folks. First of all, someone who's leading a team now or is planning to lead a team in the near future. People who care about how much value you can take out of the business. You know, business requires all of us to have certain inputs, and somehow the sum total of those inputs leads to a certain set of outputs, which could be financial, it could be emotional, it could be, painful, right? All kinds of outputs, but it's always a reflection of what we're putting in. Certainly as leaders, we have a huge influence over what comes out of the business. Third, it's important for you to be a person who's comfortable being able to admit that you don't know it all. And I hope that that's why you're on the CSC calls to start with, is to say, I may have had a lot of success, I may do a lot of things really well, but I'm here still to learn how to do things better. There's no doubt that leadership is a lifelong learning endeavor. And so I appreciate all of you who say, I want to keep growing myself. And finally, the fourth one, those who are willing to challenge themselves. I'm certain that some of what we talk about will be challenging for you mentally. Some part of you is going to say, I don't want to do that. That sounds too hard. That sounds too confusing. That's unfamiliar to me. That's not the way I've done things in the past. And guess what, folks? That's exactly how we can consider getting to a different way of leading the teams. If your results on your team are exactly what you want them to be, then don't change anything you're thinking and don't change anything you're doing. In fact, you don't have any need to be on these calls with me or Chirag or anybody else. On the other hand, if you're not completely satisfied with what results you're getting, then think about finding a way to do something different. And that means often that you need to challenge yourself in ways that are not easy or familiar to you. So we're here to help you do that. We're here to help you do it with care, with support, with the expectation that you can do what it is that we're talking about. And Chirag and I feel very strongly about implementation. And so we want to try to make everything that we talk about implementable for you. That doesn't mean you need to act on every topic in every session. People do complain that it can be like a fire hose. There's so many things and I don't have time to implement them all. Our intention is not for you to implement everything from every session. It's to pick and choose what has relevance to you and and importance to you, and act on those things that can create the greatest bang for the buck for you. What will we cover in these sessions? All kinds of things. We have 52 sessions this year that we're going to go through. Leadership is a huge topic. It's every bit as big as sales and maybe bigger. And so we could go on for years. And in fact, this is my third year doing this. And so, there's still a lot more that we get to explore with each other. Here are some of the things that we'll talk about. How can I coach my agents and staff so that they can perform the way I want them to and need them to? Sometimes I might struggle with that. How can we make sure we have clear roles and structure for the business? Many people ask us about that. How do we ensure buy-in from people who are working for us? How do we hold people accountable? Some people hold back from holding people accountable because I'm not sure how to have that conversation, not sure how people might respond to the conversation. How do we hire the right people? How do we create an inspiring vision for the team? How do we ensure that our service standards are consistently applied again and again and again to all clients?
Go to your bank.
You know what? I'm going to pull this down for a minute. We're going to mute everybody.
Let me finish.
CSC, where are you? There we go.
Hope I muted.
Okay, you're a host as well now. Herson, if you could just mute everybody, please. Thank you. All right, let me go back to that slide. Okay. Efficient communication processes. Everyone wants to communicate efficiently. It's not so easy to do. How do we do that? We'll talk about that regularly. How do we build a high-performance culture? Your team's success is a reflection of your team's culture, among many other things. How to have difficult conversations, recruiting great teammates. Recruiting and having people on the team is extremely important. I'm sure many of you who've hired someone who turned out to be not the right fit for the team understand how painful it can be to have the wrong people on the team. And so the question is, how do we do that? And how do we get the right people on there? I always say, and you'll hear me say it many times this year, the first rule of effective teaming is get the right people on the team. And so there's some stuff that we'll be talking about regarding recruiting and hiring and onboarding. That will be part of it as well. Talk about value propositions. How do you create a value proposition for clients that's effective for them? How do you create a value proposition for prospective employees or staff members so that they'll want to come to you? And of course, goal setting and achievement. So these are just some of the topics we'll be talking about and many others. You should know that our sessions will probably run per topic over several sessions at a time. Everything is not going to be like discretely one session at a time because many of these topics require more consideration and coverage. So we might have a series of 3 or 4 about goal setting, for example, or we might have 3 or 4 about recruiting or about onboarding, something like that. But trust that there's a process that will give you that you can work through that particular aspect of the business from a leadership point of view that'll help you apply the best practices there. How will this work? Well, we'll have sessions every Wednesday at this time, 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 on the West Coast. And every 4th Wednesday, that is the 4th Wednesday of every month, we're going to add an extra 30 minutes right after the call. So for anyone who wants to stick on, ask a few questions, or maybe you tried to implement something the week before and you had a problem that you didn't anticipate, you'd like to ask how you can handle something like that, I'm going to stick on for a full hour so that we can ask those questions and help you implement. We're doing that because people had asked for that last year, so we're adding that on at this stage. Also, please don't ask where everything is going to be. As Chirag said yesterday on his call, everything that we have is always going to be on the platform, okay? So any slide deck that I use, which will be pretty frequent, and any materials that are additional to that, which are also quite frequent, will always be on the platform. So you can search on the platform, and where it says like for leaders, you'll click on that box on the right and it'll show all of the leader events that I do, as well as the other expert mentor things as well. Okay, so let's begin. What is leadership? If I were to ask you what leadership is, and I ask you to write a definition of it, you might come up with a kind of a standard common perception that leadership is about achieving goals with teammates, something like that. And that's perfectly fine for our purposes as a starting point. You might say it's something like the art and skill of guiding a team to achieve common goals. Understood? Perfectly fine. There are other ways to look at what leadership is or isn't. The second one is a little bit different. This is according to Eisenhower, who spent 50 years in leadership in the military. And after all that time, he came to the conclusion that leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it. So it's an interesting statement, right? It's got that second part at the end there, getting someone to do something that you want done because he wants to do it. There's something about your ability to touch someone else in a way that they're motivated to do what matters most to them. And so, like, what does that mean for us? And then this is this final question. I want to take this down after this slide. Are leadership and management the same thing for you, or are they different for you? So I'd like to have everyone put into the chat, for you, is leadership and management the same thing, or are they different things? Just put same or different into the chat, please. Okay, I see mostly different there. Actually, everyone says different. So I'm curious, what is the difference for you between management and leadership? If I ask you what's the difference between management and leadership, what would you say? Just drop that in the chat. What's the difference? In a couple of words, what would you say is the difference? Management is more behind the scenes, okay? Being able to make hard decisions comes under management, okay? Leadership is vision, management is election of the vision, okay? Leadership is helping make people better, management getting people to do what they should. Leadership inspires, okay? Good leadership helps its, I assume that means staff, Tricia, succeed and grow. Leadership is more rally and inspire, vision, management, more daily grind and accountability. Okay, lots of different perspectives here. Yep, so this is just what we might expect with a group that's kind of as varied as this. So it's important for us to think about this, because if you think that leadership and management are the same thing, then when you're doing one thing, you're doing both things. If you think they're different, then at some point you might be being a manager, and at other points you might be being a leader. One thing I'd like to point out to everybody is a common misperception about leadership, and this happens in corporate world quite distinctly, but everywhere actually, and that is we need to separate this idea that leadership is about positional authority. That is, the person who has the position of authority is the leader. We commonly refer to that person as the leader. But if you've ever been around groups of people and certain people in positions of authority, you know from your own experience that those people aren't sometimes leading, right? You probably worked for a boss and you probably said at one time or another, this person's not a leader. Even though he or she may have positional authority, they're not actually leading. You see, if leadership is about positional authority, then by definition, anyone with great position would be a great leader, right? If we're defining leadership as positional authority, then anyone with that great position must be a great leader by definition. And we know that's not true, because every CEO, every president, every vice president of every company, every pope, every single one of these people with great position would be a great leader. And we know that's not true. At the same time, if positional authority were the foundation of leadership, or our definition of what leadership is, then those without great positional authority could not be great leaders. By definition, correct? But we know that many people who are quite effective as leaders, let's say Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, these people weren't people with great positional authority. They, in a sense, came out of the masses, right? They weren't heads of these billion-dollar corporations. They weren't elected to high office in a political standing. They weren't the commissioner of the NFL or some other big sports league. They were more or less ordinary people. And so there's something about leadership that is irrespective of position. And so that's why I'm not going to grant all of you guys the title of leader just because you're all in leadership positions. And I'll say the same for myself. So I may be the chief learning officer, but that doesn't mean I'm an effective leader unless I'm leading effectively. And so we want to make a distinction today between leadership and management. And so you all had a lot of different good kind of items mentioned in the chat there, although if you notice, some of them were kind of contradictory, right? One person sees it this way, one person sees it that way. So I'd like to share a document that will kind of lay out some of the differences that we see between management and leadership. And what I want to say to you is, as a person in the position that you're in your team and the work that you do, you're being a leader at some times probably, and you're being a manager at other times. Now, Chirag and I work with, countless clients. I have a lot of individual clients that I work with. Chirag and I work with the mastermind groups. If you're familiar with our mastermind groups, we co-facilitate those groups. We've done live events together, and obviously we do these calls. And so we've had the chance to speak with thousands and thousands of agents, and do, of course, on a regular basis. And in hearing how everybody runs their businesses, what we recognize is that people are doing tasks that might fall under the manager category sometimes, and other tasks that might be under the leader category. One simple way that we can distinguish leadership and management is, and it's just one way, I'm not saying it's the only way. One way is you manage things, you lead people. And somebody said something about people in there too. So that's one simple way. Like managing things is about managing processes, policies, procedures, things like that. Maybe the sales process with a client. Whereas leadership is about connecting with people, inspiring people, communicating. There's some overlap, obviously, but we want to draw a distinction today just for you to think about the importance of separating certain tasks that you do and other tasks that you do in your role. So let me pull up this other document. Yes, this will be available to everybody on the platform after today. So when we think about managing the business versus leading the business, there's a couple of clear distinctions that we can make. And when you add them all up, it actually is quite a separate category of activities. Managing the business, we tend to be reactive. We wake up in the morning, the client needs this, and so we jump and do that. Or there's a showing that we need to arrange, so we go do that. It tends to be something that we're highly reactive to. That is, circumstances come to us and we manage the situation. Leading the business is not about being in that responsive situation. It's about thinking ahead and being proactive about what needs to happen tomorrow, next week, 6 months from now, maybe a year from today. Managing the business is very much focused on everyday actions. Absolutely. We're in the here and now when we're managing the business. You're managing this deal, you're managing that deal, you're managing some kind of a phone call with Compass at the same time. Everyday actions is really where the focus is. Leading the business is about building culture. Building culture is something that's not tied to necessarily here and now, but it's a longer term process that many of us never even touch or get into. Managing the business is about ensuring that the processes are being followed. Absolutely, they need to be followed. This is how we serve clients and serve them well. Leading the business is about taking time out of the process, stepping back and saying, how can we have a better process? Why would a different process be better for us? Making sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's very different from making sure people are growing professionally and personally. Focusing on achieving goals versus selecting the right goals. Solving today's issues versus planning for next year and beyond. Ensuring efficiency in the workplace, very important, very different from evolving the workspace. Making sure we satisfy our customers versus learning more about our customers and how else we might serve them a year from today. Managing the business is absolutely about getting the to-do list done, no doubt about it. Being a leader is more about, are we growing closer as a team? Making sure people stay in their lane versus making sure that the roles are clear to everybody. How about this one? Making people do what I say. This is one that I hear a lot from team leaders. They say, how can I get my team to just do what I say? Well, no doubt about it. That's important. That's very different from setting a common core of rules of engagement, which is how we work together. We'll talk about that later as we go on. Very different from just saying, look, go do what I tell you to do and just leave me alone kind of a thing. Ensure deadlines are met, ensure boundaries are respected. It is true that we sometimes fall behind as far as deadlines go, but what I hear when I hear is a lot of kind of pain and suffering for a lot of teams is when boundaries are not respected. That's a leadership task. And if we're managing, we tend to focus on one area of the business. That is, if we're in sales, we manage the sales. If we're in manufacturing, we're on the assembly line, we manage the assembly line, right? Whereas the leader has to, by definition, focus on all areas of the business. So when you look down this row of items all together, it actually is a whole kind of separate set of mindsets and perspectives and areas of focus and actions. So there's really quite a distinction here. Now, I don't mean to imply that everything is so simple in black and white as it's listed here. And I don't mean to say that leading is more important than managing, certainly not. Both of these tasks are really important. What I want to ask you to consider is, are you on one side of this list or on the other? Or both? Where are you managing the business? Where are you leading the business? We'll talk about that a little bit later. Second page here talks a little bit about the leader's mindset. You see the items listed in green here is more about leadership. The ones listed in black are more about management. How many of you feel like you're often just getting by instead of growing? How many of you feel like you're usually just executing rather than developing? How many of you feel like you're spending a lot of time telling your team rather than listening to your team? How many of you feel like you're responding to the world around you rather than influencing? And how many of you tend to look at business and think about business and interact with business in terms of tasks, actions, and behaviors versus relationships, right? Different ways to think about how we're bringing ourselves to our work. How does this show up in terms of the questions we ask ourselves? Well, there's a lot of questions that managers ask themselves, including, are all the deals on schedule? Are we on track? Is everything going smoothly? How do I get everyone to follow my rules? How do I get everything done? That's such an important and pressing question for so many. How can I get more clients? Of course, very important. But leaders ask very different kinds of questions, like, where will the market be in 2 years? And how are we preparing for that now? That is a question for a leader. And you can't escape it. You can't just say, I'm too busy to think about it. How does my team feel about working here? How can I make it better? How is my staff development plan going? How many of you have a staff development plan? How many of you have a written plan for developing your staff so that they are someplace else a year from today than they are right now in terms of their skills and capabilities? If you don't worry about it. We'll talk about it over the course of the year. How are we growing as a team? And how am I growing as a leader and person? Are you just on autopilot and you're doing the same thing you've done for the last 17 years in the business, or is there something new and different for you? I assume that you're here at CSC because you want to learn and grow. I'm glad to hear that. That's definitely a leadership type question. Who are our stakeholders? How can I learn more about them? What do we stand for here as an organization? That's a huge question that's a world away from simply every day, let's just process this deal, make sure the deal goes forward. What do I stand for as a leader? As a leader, you're modeling one thing or another, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And what people see you standing for is how they see you as a leader. Question is, do they see what it is you want to project? What are the key elements of our culture that make this place a better place to work than others? You want to hang on to great people and you want to attract other people to you? It's a great question for you to be thinking about as a leader of your business. And finally, what outside the box idea, if implemented, would make this place truly unique compared to all of our competitors? How much time do you spend thinking about a question like that? If that question hasn't really crossed your mind, then great. You've got a great opportunity to add value to the business in ways that you hadn't before. Think of the first time that you heard, let's say, Amazon was going to deliver packages by drone. Did you think, wow, that's a pretty cool idea? Like they're just going to fly the thing in there and put it right on your front step, and then it flies away and goes back to the fulfillment center, right? That's an interesting, innovative idea that would be hard for anybody else to match. I don't know if it's the right idea. I'm not saying it's the right idea. I'm just saying it's innovation. Or maybe the first time you heard about Amazon as a bookstore online with 1 million titles that, they could never fit in a store. And you thought, wow, that's pretty innovative. Or if the first time you heard Uber, right? That's a very innovative tool to use when you're traveling around. Airbnb, there's tons of them, right? The question is, what are you doing to evolve and grow the business? So the point here is we're just trying to make a clear distinction that there are management tasks and there are leadership tasks. And the leadership tasks, yeah, there's some overlap, but in a sense, there's a whole set of different things that you need to think about and apply yourself to in addition to the regular everyday stuff if you want to get the most out of your business. Because we all see that teams function best with good performers and good leadership. There's tons of examples in the business world and in the sports world of teams that have great performers, but they don't win it all because the coaching or the leadership is not necessarily there. The teamwork is not there, right? You get great teamwork to perform at the highest level, but teamwork comes from leadership. And so if you want the highest potential level of performance from your team, you need to make sure that you're leading effectively. And that's what we're going to work on this year. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is dedicate 2% of your time each week to leading yourself and your team effectively. That comes out to 1 hour of time a week if you work a 50-hour week. I'd like to ask you to consider dedicating 2% of your time to that. And if you say, oh no, I don't have time to do anything more, well, I want to tell you that still leaves you 98% of the time to do everything else you want in your business. And I can guarantee you a lot of that time is wasted. It's not effective for your business, not nearly as effective in the long run as if you perfect your leadership skills and approach. So what that 1 hour comes out to be is 30 minutes here on this call and up to 30 minutes, maybe less sometimes, on an activity that follows the call to help you grow your leadership. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do for this first week. I'm going to ask you to go onto the platform and download a copy of that sheet that I just gave you. And look down the left column, the right column, look down the two different the separated sections there between managing and leading, and circle the statements that you can relate to. And then look at which ones are the ones where you're spending your time. You might find that a whole bunch of your stuff is actually on the managing side, or you might find a whole bunch of your stuff is on the leadership side, or you might find it's 50-50. I'm not saying it should be exactly 50-50 or something like that. But when we've done this with other leaders, team leaders, what we found is they circle a whole bunch of stuff on the managing side, and all those other questions and other things on the leadership side, really things that have not really been in their mind going forward. And if that's the case, then that's an important thing for you to think about. You're saying, I've been managing my team and managing it quite effectively, and now I can add a leadership function for myself and for the team as well. And to the extent that you do that, you'll wring more, you'll derive more, you'll leverage more value out of the business, whether that's profit for you that you care about, whether it's growth of the team, whether it's your reputation in the marketplace, whether it's the happiness of the people who work with you and for you. However you measure success for yourself, when you are managing effectively and leading effectively, you're setting the team up for the greatest possible value creation for everyone who works with you, for you, and most importantly, for your clients. Okay, folks, we're going to stop there for today. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thanks for your attention today. I look forward to diving into all this with all of you. See you next Wednesday.